It's funny. Have you ever noticed that in a really heated argument, the person who holds the most power is almost never the one shouting the loudest? Seriously, think about it. Why is it that the quietest person in the room, the one who just absorbs a verbal attack without even flinching, almost always emerges victorious? Well, welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to completely deconstruct the hidden psychological mechanics behind this phenomenon. We're diving deep into the concept of the non-reaction, and we'll see exactly how controlling your own emotional feedback loop isn't just a neat trick, it is literally the ultimate form of interpersonal power. We're talking about dangerous confidence here. All right, let's dive right in.
So right off the bat, we need to understand that there is a massive, profound chasm between an emotional reaction and a strategic response. An emotional reaction? Well, that's impulsive. It's reflexive, and worst of all, it means your behavior is being externally controlled. They pull the string and you dance. Not great, right? But a strategic response, on the other hand, is calculated, deliberate, and totally internally anchored. You see, staying silent in the face of provocation is so often mistaken for passivity or weakness. But in reality, it is a highly disciplined, active choice to retain absolute control of the situation.
Section 1. Dramaturgy and the Mask. Irving Goffman's Social Theater.
To really grasp the mechanics of this non-reaction, we've got to look at Irving Goffman's seminal text, The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. Goffman proposed this genuinely fascinating premise. He argued that all of our social life is essentially a theatrical performance. Basically, we are all actors. We present this highly calculated front-stage persona to an audience, all while frantically trying to conceal our messy, unpolished, authentic reactions in a backstage area. When you're in a conflict, you are standing under the bright lights of that front stage. And your opponent? Their entire goal is to force you to break character, to make you expose that chaotic backstage emotional state.
And that brings us perfectly to a core concept of Goffman's work: impression management. This is the calculated effort to guide exactly how others perceive us by deliberately regulating our expressions and behavior. Picture this: you're in a really tense boardroom meeting, and a coworker makes a passive-aggressive remark specifically designed to undermine your expertise. In that high-stakes moment, a non-reaction acts like a literal dramaturgical shield. When someone attacks you verbally, they are banking on a reciprocal reaction, right? They want anger, defensiveness, or for you to just retreat. But by deploying a non-reaction, you are flawlessly managing your impression. You're communicating, without saying a single word, that their little attack hasn't even scratched your armor.
Goffman actually hit the nail on the head when he wrote, "Perhaps the focus of dramaturgical discipline is to be found in the management of one's face and voice. Actual affective response must be concealed, and an appropriate affective response must be displayed." So, what does this all mean for us? Well, if someone insults you, your immediate, totally normal internal feeling might be shock or maybe intense anger. But dramaturgical discipline requires you to conceal that by displaying the appropriate response, which in the case of a non-reaction is just absolute, unbothered calm. You completely disarm your opponent. You're denying them the very feedback they desperately need to keep their attack going. And just like that, you instantly shift the power dynamic of the entire room back in your favor.
Section 2. The Internal Locus, Carl Rogers, and Emotional Autonomy.
Okay, but how do we actually achieve that kind of crazy discipline? Well, we need to shift gears from external social performances to our own internal mechanics. Enter Carl Rogers and his concept of the internal locus of evaluation. Now, this is a psychological state where your center of responsibility and all your value judgments reside entirely within yourself. It is completely independent of external approval or threats. A dangerously confident individual flat out refuses to let some random provocation dictate their inner equilibrium. Look, if your locus of evaluation is external, an insult genuinely hurts because you're relying on that other person to tell you what you're worth. But if your locus is internal, their insult is just noise. It has absolutely zero bearing on your reality.
This insight from Rogers' incredible book, On Becoming a Person, takes this even deeper. He states, "The more I can keep a relationship free of judgment and evaluation, the more this will permit the other person to reach the point where he recognizes that the locus of evaluation, the center of responsibility, lies within himself." Now think about applying that directly to a conflict. By completely withholding your own reflexive judgments and reactions, by just staying totally neutral, you don't just protect your own internal locus, you actually force the aggressor to confront their own behavior. It's like you become a giant psychological mirror. Without your emotional reaction to feed off of, their aggression has nowhere to go but right back onto themselves.
And a person who has truly mastered this internal locus, they exhibit some incredibly effective traits.
We're talking about self-directing behavior, an openness to reality, flexible adaptiveness, a total refusal to just be a facade, and prioritizing intrinsic satisfaction way over external praise. So when you see someone execute a flawless non-reaction, you are not witnessing someone who is just emotionally numb. No way. You are witnessing someone with profound psychological maturity. They are so deeply grounded in their own self-worth that a petty verbal attack literally cannot penetrate their atmosphere.
Section 3. The strategic pause. The mechanics of disarmament. So, let's get practical. How do we synthesize Goffman's theatrical discipline and Rogers' internal locus into a rapid-fire actionable toolkit? It essentially boils down to 3 tactical steps. Step 1. The controlled pause. When the provocation hits, do absolutely nothing for 3 full seconds. This is Goffman's management of face and voice in action. You are actively breaking that anticipated reaction cycle. Step 2. Unwavering eye contact. Look at them, but not with anger. Look at them with clinical curiosity. This projects Rogers' internal locus. You are observing them, not absorbing them. And finally, step 3, emotional disarmament. When you do eventually speak, make sure your voice is low, slow, and entirely devoid of the emotional frequency they just threw at you. The aggressor's energy, meaning absolutely zero resistance, just collapses in on itself.
Section 4. Dangerously confident, mastering your emotional feedback loop.
At the end of the day, mastering your emotional feedback loop isn't just some clever conversational trick. It really is the most sophisticated form of interpersonal power there is. I want to leave you with this incredibly empowering quote from Carl Rogers. To recognize that I am the one who chooses and I am the one who determines the value of an experience for me is both an invigorating and a frightening realization. And he's right. It is frightening, mostly because you can't blame anyone else for how you feel anymore. But man, is it infinitely invigorating, because that realization right there is the exact blueprint for absolute, unwavering autonomy. You are the sole architect of your emotional state. So I'm going to leave you with this one provocative question to chew on. In your next conflict, who's going to dictate your reality? Are you going to be the puppet, just reacting reflexively on somebody else's stage? Or will you embrace the dangerous confidence of the non-reaction, anchor that internal locus, and dictate the reality of the room yourself? The choice, as always, is entirely yours.